Greetings and salutations. Today I'm going to be covering chapter 3. So I'm not sure how far we'll get into it, but let's get started. Chapter 3 is called Thinking in the Service of Knowledge. So what this chapter basically discusses, it spends a lot of time discussing thinking and just how we come up with concepts and whatnot. So I'm going to start with paragraph 1. I'm going to just start reading it. When I observe how a billiard ball, when struck, communicates its motion to another, I remain entirely without influence on the course of the observed process. The direction of motion and the velocity of the second ball are determined by the direction and velocity of the first. As long as I remain a mere spectator, I can only say anything about the movement of the second ball when it has taken place. But it is quite different when I begin to reflect on the content of my observation. The purpose of my reflection is to form concepts of the occurrence. I connect the concept of an elastic ball with certain other concepts of mechanics, and take into consideration the special circumstances which obtain in the instance in question. I try, in other words, to add to the occurrence which takes place without my assistance a second process which takes place in the conceptual sphere. This latter one is dependent on me. This is shown by the fact that I can rest content with the observation and renounce all search for concepts if I have no need of them. If, however, this need is present, then I am not satisfied until I have brought the concepts ball, elasticity, motion, impact, velocity, etc. into a certain connection to which the observed process is related in a definite way. As surely as the occurrence goes on independently of me, so surely is the conceptual process unable to take place without my assistance. So the summary for that paragraph is I can add to the process of observation by forming concepts. And I would like to just add as well that the last sentence is also a good summary, basically saying that the conceptual process is unable to take place with my assistance. So what he's doing in this first paragraph is just, describing an example of where we're thinking and whatnot. So don't get too distracted by a lot of what he's saying in here. The main point is that we're active participants in the conceptual process. Okay. So paragraph 2. We shall have to consider later whether this activity of mine really proceeds from my own independent being, or whether these modern physiologists are right who say that we cannot think as we will, but that we must think just as those thoughts and thought connections determined that happen to be present in our consciousness. See footnote 1. I'll go to that later. For the present, we wish merely to establish the fact that we constantly feel obliged to seek for concepts and connections of concepts which stand in a certain relation to the objects and events which are given independently of us. Whether this activity is really ours, or whether we perform it according to an unalterable necessity, is a question we need not decide at present. That it appears in the first instance to be ours is beyond question. We know for certain that we are not given the concepts together with the objects. That I am myself the agent in the conceptual process may be an illusion, but to immediate observation it certainly appears to be so. The question is therefore, what do we gain by supplementing an event with a conceptual counterpart? And the summary for that we did is we feel compelled to supplement all events with a conceptual counterpart. What, if anything, is gained by this? So in the first paragraph we mentioned that we're active participants in creating concepts, but there's also the argument that what if this is all just an illusion? What if it's just our brain, it's all these chemical things, and we're not really actively participating? Yes, it's in the beginning here. as he says, we shall have to consider later whether this activity of mine really proceeds from my own independent being, or whether these modern physiologists are right when they say we cannot think as we will, but that we must think just as those thoughts and thought connections determine that happen to be present in our consciousness. And let me just check the footnote. Okay, yeah, the footnote, there is nothing really in that footnote that would help us with that. So that is what is important in that paragraph. So what do we get out of creating concepts? And that's something we have to look at as well. That's paragraph 2 for you. And again, he's going to talk about later whether we're doing our own thinking or whether it's just really, chemicals and whatnot, brain activity that we don't have control over, and we're just really, a byproduct of that, and we're not actually doing our own thinking. But he's going to discuss that later. But for now, the main point is, what do we gain out of supplementing an event with concepts? Okay, paragraph 3. There is a profound difference between the ways in which, for me, the parts of an event are related to one another before and after the discovery of the corresponding concepts. Mere observation can trace the parts of a given event as they occur, but their connection remains obscure without the help of concepts. I see the first billiard ball move towards the second in a certain direction and with a certain velocity. What will happen after the impact I must await, and again I can only follow it with my eyes. Suppose someone at that moment of impact obstructs my view of the field where the event is taking place. Then, as mere spectator, I remain ignorant of what happens afterwards. The situation is different if prior to the obstruction of my view I have discovered the concepts corresponding to the pattern of events. In that case, I can say what will happen even when I am no longer able to observe. An event or an object which is merely observed does not of itself reveal anything about its connection with other events or objects. This connection becomes evident only when observation is combined with thinking. So the summary for that is, the connection between the parts of a given event only becomes evident if observation is combined with thinking. So that, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. It's just that you can't just have observations. You have to think, and then you'll have concepts. There's lots of things that are, lots of concepts out there, lots of observations, an example is in families, the concept of listening to people. That's an idea, that's a concept, and the concept could be, if you're listening to people, that helps to resolve conflict. For example, say you observe a family situation where there's lots of fighting, and then you see a family where they don't fight, and that's because they listen to each other rather than whatnot. So your concept is listening helps people, and it's the thinking part. There's the observing, and then there's the thinking, and it's the thinking that brings these observations and creates the idea and the thought. And so that's pointing out that you need to think and have concepts as well as observations. So we'll discuss the rest of this in our next segment. Thank you.